Okay. Hi, friends. So, just before we actually read this, we have to do a take or two. And so, as I was reading December 10th, right, the child within me is playful, beautiful, and expressive. The first take, you didn't see me fall apart, which I'm glad you didn't. I don't, remember, this is my story. I don't remember, and this is a story that permeates through the organization. I know, because we're human and we all have the same story. We all have a story. For my story, when my dad was disfellowshipped for 15 years, I did not have good memories. I did not have good childhood memories. I remember being told, you can't pray for your father. And as a child, you're supposed to get closer to Jehovah. And there's no way that the physical human being that you're supposed to love in your home, you can't pray for that person? That just doesn't make any sense. If we're supposed to pray for our enemies. This was not an enemy in my home. This was my father. He was somebody I loved. He would get up in the morning. He'd get up exhausted and take care of us. He would love us. Yes, he was an alcoholic, but he was a working alcoholic. That meant that he could, if you're not familiar with alcoholism at all, he could go and provide well. He just was his own worst enemy. And yes, he had vices that came with the drink, and it affected our house, but he was still a good human being. And I think for people who are dealing with addictions or a family that have addictions, you have to see the good portion of that person. There's still a good person in there. Sometimes there are others that are not. For my situation, for me, my father was a loving and kind person. He's the first person I went to when I had a problem. I knew I couldn't go to my mother because she couldn't handle the issues. But I could go to my father, and he was patient, and he was kind, and he was loving, and he would listen without judgment. And that was something that I knew I had in my dad. He got a little kooky because after a while, you start to drink, it pickles your brains. But he was, for the most part, a really good person. And I loved being with my father. So not being able to pray for my dad was damaging. I felt distraught. I didn't understand. So when Jehovah's Witnesses say that it brings families together, that Jehovah's Witnesses will bring families together, my story is it did not bring my family together. It made it more divisive. Because here this man was working so hard for our family, but we couldn't pray for him. And that left, it was negative. That was not a positive thing for my family. And that happened over my childhood. So, from about 5 years old, 5, 10, 15, right? So I know my parents were going through difficulties up until 5 years old. I knew they did. Everyone knew in the congregation that they did. My mom made sure everybody knew in the congregation that we had problems. So, it wasn't a happy home. Childhood was difficult for me growing up in the organization. It was sad. Well, that's my story. That a little portion. It's hard to get 49 years in, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Okay, well, thank you for coming on my journey and listening to me, spending time with me. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to ask. I have a busy life, but I try and pay attention. Thank you. Follow your bliss and be good humans.